Okay. I know the committee has seen some of these slides before, and now the public is probably seeing some of these for the second or third time. They're mainly to review. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on some of these slides. Others I will spend a little bit more time on. I'm going to review for the committee and the public our FY25 approved operating budget, quick reminder of the 5-year forecast, quick explanation of our deficit, a review of how we're balancing, how we would anticipate balancing the budget with the given deficit that we have. I am then going to propose the FY26 budget options to the committee for their consideration and vote this evening, and then we'll review timeline and next steps. So as a reminder, this is where we are in the current fiscal year. Our total operating budget that we're running on is $35,796,978. The 5-year forecast using a 4% assumption and a 3% inflation rate for FY26, we're looking at a deficit of just about $4.4 million, with anticipated deficits in subsequent years from FY27 to FY30 in the amounts of $1.6 million, $1.65 million, $1.7 million, and $1.8 million, respectively. As I've mentioned before, the reality is that based on current projections, Stoneham is able to afford a 2.5% increase, which is as far as we can levy for the 2.5 as per 2.5, Prop 2.5. That amount ends up being $894,924, which would increase our fiscal year 26 budget to $36,691,902. This gap severely compromises the viability and the sustainability of the Stoneham Public Schools. I have said it before, and I'm going to say it again, we cannot run on that budget. We cannot sustain our school district on the $36,691,902 budget. This also severely limits the committee's bargaining position for our collective bargaining agreements, and it would mean that educators' salaries would remain the lowest in the region. In order to sustain what we have and to provide for a modest increase for our collective bargaining agreements, SPS needs at a minimum $39,425,375, which is an increase of 10.1% over the fiscal 25 budget. In order to balance the budget, if we are unable to somehow make up this deficit, we're going to be reducing our budget between $4 and $4.5 million. This is an estimate based on unknown costs that are associated with our bargained agreements and the possibility of needing to redistrict. Although at this point, it's looking less and less likely that we're going to be able to redistrict for the next fiscal year. As time is continuing to go on, the opportunity for that to happen is getting smaller and smaller. So potential savings for a redistrict will likely not be realized for fiscal year 26. To balance the budget with reductions, I'm going to go back to several fiscal years. And I don't know why my graphics aren't showing up here, but this is supposed to represent fiscal year 24. We're going to go back a couple of years, and Ms. Bruin, who was here earlier and spoke during public comment, much more eloquently than I can, described the previous year's cuts. That $542,000 were reductions that we had to make for the fiscal year 24 budget. That was not inclusive of things that were not unfunded. What's the difference? The things on the top were things that were already in the previous year's budget that we actually had to reduce. There were actual positions that had to be reduced. We also had positions that we wanted to fund but couldn't, so they never made it into the budget. That's why They're defined as unfunded. And at that time, you can see we were trying to get a library aide, an additional half-time assistant facilities director. As this board knows, but a lot of folks don't know, our current facilities director is split. It's a shared position with the town. There are many, many buildings in this town. And Brian McNeil, our facilities director, he called me a couple weekends ago at 1 a.m. He was in this building with our custodian dealing with an issue right below us. And that's one body trying to manage all the buildings in our district. So, and this goes back a few years that we were trying to get that in the budget. And we also were not able to fund at that time an elementary teacher at South. The rest of the unfunded, what you see here in these subsequent columns, this is FY25. And I'm sorry the graphic doesn't show up. It's something about my ability to present here, but the actual slides that I have, this is FY25. We had over $1 million in unfunded positions. We needed, in addition to the things that we cut in FY24, we were not able to fund a reading teacher at Robin Hood, an interventionist at Robin Hood, a BCBA and a speech and language pathologist at the preschool, 4 ABA techs at the preschool, $10,000 of expenses related to new preschool curriculum and professional development. We had we were not able to fund $26,000 for district technology, $25,000 in legal, which we need for ongoing bargaining and litigation, emergency preparedness, which we were trying to put into the budget because we need things like tourniquets and what we call stop the bleed kits, and we need to upgrade our radio systems, and we need to make sure that our cameras are working properly and that our locking mechanisms are working properly, that our windows are working properly. That is all part of that we were not able to fund. In addition, the elementary health curriculum, which the state has mandated, we are now 2 years out of compliance. That was supposed to be put into place 2 years ago. We were not able to fund the health curriculum. We luckily, even though we had to cut elementary literacy and Hill for literacy, through the good work of our local delegates, we were able to get state earmarks, and that made up for the Hill and for our literacy curriculum. We had to cut our STEM supply, ELL supply, elementary physical education supply, middle school health, athletic transportation, general ed summer school, which we can no longer run, and our ESSER funded positions were reduced because our ESSER funding ran out. And we had to reduce our professional development line. So these are all from FY25. Hey, look at that. I guess I just had to press a few more buttons. We also had athletic stipends that were reduced by $99,000 in FY25, athletic supplies by $33,000, our high school activities account. I put an asterisk next to that because that was also part of the grant funding that came through with our state earmark. So we were able to refund that, meaning able to run those activities. We had to reduce the transition specialist. Mr. Epsgreer spoke about that just a couple of days ago. Our social studies teacher at the high school, art, math, world language, a RISE teacher, science texts, math texts. We also had to reduce a instructional technology coach at the middle school, 2 ESPs at the middle school, savings through attrition, a technology education teacher, a first grade teacher at CP that we need due to enrollment increases, an ABA tech at CP, a therapeutic learning program, which we have now deferred going on 3 fiscal years, which by not being able to have a therapeutic learning program for students that have that need, we are spending the money by sending them out of district, which is a lot more. 2 ESPs at Robin Hood, 1 LBLD teacher at Robin Hood, an STE, science, technology, engineering teacher at South, half of a music teacher. And then onwards we go. We had to reduce an admin assistant in human resources. Human resources, we have one person in that role for over 550 staff. We had to reduce an administrative support role through central office. Technology hardware was reduced by $250,000. Our partnership with North Shore Community College, we had to cancel that out, so students are no longer able to do a dual enrollment. Lunch debt was a paper cut because with free lunches now, this was a line item in the budget. When we had a balance at the end of the year, we would have to pay the balance if we couldn't get the money from the families. Transportation and vocational, we were able to reduce that due to fewer students needing that for this fiscal year. We deferred a software program in human resources which would enable us to basically streamline our processes and make things much more efficient and timely for folks that are looking for information, namely having a portal where folks can go in and have a one-stop shop for everything. So instead, it's taking our one person in the HR role to do all these administrative tasks. 1.0 elementary rise class and one bus. So when you total all of those things up, for FY24 it was over $500,000. FY25 was $2 million, but then we were able to get the earmarks of about $725,000, and then we had unfunded that never made it into the budget, over $1 million. So just for those 2 fiscal years, we had just over $3.5 million in reductions. This list is for fiscal year 26, and again, everyone has heard these as recently as 2 weeks ago. Nothing has really changed since then, so I'm not going to go through every single thing in this list. This will also be posted online, but it's the same list that folks heard about 2 weeks ago. So when we look at all of this and then we add in our offsets, the FY26 reductions right now are about $3.9 million based on some calculations that we've done by adding in some of those offsets. And by offsets, I mean looking at fee increases for athletics, fee increases for tuition increases for preschool, and there was one more increase that we had talked about.
Athletics.
What was that?
Athletic?
It was athletics, the family cap on athletics.
Family cap.
Oh, we had talked about potentially doing parking fees for students at the high school, but again, these are all things that the committee needs to vote on. So if you look at the grand total of these several fiscal years that we're looking at, we're at $7.5 million of reductions to our budget. And so when I've said that we're running on skeleton, we are literally running on skeleton. So we're still not at 4.5 million. There's still another $500,000 to go for FY26 reductions. And as I mentioned before, this budget would provide for a most limited bargaining position for the school committee. I mentioned some of these ideas for potential further reductions. We have received feedback about a lot of these ideas. I know that the committee has received some feedback on these. We've been looking at all of the input that we've been receiving. This could be, again, these are proposed, these are not set in stone, but possibilities that could provide a potential savings of another $1.2 million. So when folks are looking at these numbers, these are the options that I'm proposing to the school committee. I believe that we heard loud and clear from the public comment from the hearing that the public wants to know not just what you need for level service, but what do you need to really invest in the schools. So I've set up here 4 different options for the committee's review and consideration. The first one is the minimum that we need. We're calling that the level service budget. That would be the increase that I just described previously of just over 3.6 million. This would aim to maintain the same number of teachers, the same class sizes, and extracurricular activities that we have in FY25. It accounts for a modest increase for our collective bargaining agreements, and as I mentioned, the most limited option. The next option is a jump to $45,621,077. We're calling this the restorative budget. What this would do is increase our budget instead of by 3.6, it would increase by 6.1. It would be a 17% increase over FY25. It would restore the reductions that we made and that I just reviewed a couple minutes ago from FY24 and 25. And it would also account for a healthier increase for our collective bargaining agreements. The next option here, what we're calling is the investment budget. This is an increase of $7.2 million. It would be 20% over FY25 budget. It would restore reductions from FY24 and 25, and it would add the unfunded lines from FY25. It would provide much more wiggle room to increase our collective bargaining agreements to our market comps. And finally, what we're calling the capital budget, which is a financial term. It's not necessarily meaning building projects. It's not that kind of capital budget. It's an investment budget, but it's, in financial terms, that's what we call it, a capital budget. It would be an increase of $8.5 million. That would represent 23% over FY25. It would restore reductions from FY24 and 25 and add the unfunded lines from FY25. And it would provide the school committee maximum ability to increase our collective bargaining agreements to middle market comps. So I'm happy to go back through any of that information. I know there's a lot in there. I know this committee's heard this over and over again, but for folks that are tuning in that are new, or for folks who aren't looking at this on a daily basis, I know it's a little bit harder to comprehend all the information at once because there's just so much of it. So I'm happy to review any of that again or answer any questions.